Closer to home, students at Green Bay West High School taking part in a stair climb to mark the anniversary of 9/11. Students came out during the school day to walk the football stadium stairs. Maria Parmigiani spoke with students on what this means to them.
Never forget. Those words echoing across the country 24 years ago. Never forget the lives lost.
2,900 people lost their lives.
The stairs climbed, the sacrifices made.
On this day, 343 New York City firefighters, 17 police officers, and over 40 Port Authority.
Today at Green Bay West, they keep the tradition alive to remember those who made the sacrifices on 9/11 by climbing the steps of their football stadium, some even carrying weighted rucksacks. While these students were born after the events of 9/11, learning about these tragedies in school helps them feel connected to, inspired by, and understand the importance of honoring the victims and first responders.
Definitely something that we need to continuously remember and bring up, especially like right now when so much is going on in politics, that we should definitely keep reminding ourselves that this is something that could happen at any point again, but we also need to be going off of that and building more off of that.
Days like this, uniting us to keep these memories alive and never forget. In Green Bay, Maria Parmigiani, Action 2 News.
And another memorial stair climb will take place at Lambeau Field on Saturday, September 20th. This is video from last year when thousands of people participated in walking up and down the stairs at the stadium, climbing the equivalent of 110 stories, the heights of the World Trade Center. Many wear heavy gear to simulate what New York firefighters wore when those attacks took place, and they ran into the towers to save lives.